I'm Andy. I've probably met a lot of you before. Today, to change things up a bit, I'm not going to be talking very much today. My main function today is to introduce two rock stars from UNICEF Australia. So I've got Alan Menzies and Nikola Sarbinowski. Nailed it. And I'll just talk to one little bit in the middle. So today, what we're going to hear from is UNICEF Australia. You'll understand the title a little bit later in Nikola's part. It's not just website speed. There's a different type of speed that's important for UNICEF. But first of all, we're going to hear from Alan about their process, what the problem was, how they went about solving it, and why they chose content. I'll tell you just a little bit in the middle about what we actually built, but we'll move quickly on to Nikola, who is not a content editor or a techie. She's essentially the end user of this. It's her job to get donations for UNICEF. So without further ado, over to you, Alan.
Thank you very much. So look, in the first instance, I think it's important to provide some additional context around our motivations for redeveloping the website and sort of highlight why we decided to kick off this project in the first place. So back around 2.5 years ago, when I first started at UNICEF Australia, we were actually using Kentico Experience back at that time. And it would be fair to say that over the years, we didn't do a great job of keeping that platform up to date. So despite the fact that we had a running website and despite the fact that we were able to take donations online, and I think for the most part, we actually did a pretty decent job of that. But despite those facts, behind the scenes, we were facing some pretty significant challenges. So from an architectural perspective, the platform wasn't very well integrated with our wider ecosystem. So we were still heavily reliant on a lot of kind of manual processes for things as simple as pushing data into the CRM system. And I can say that at the time we'd actually just rolled out a really successful Salesforce implementation. So there was obviously a lot of progress that we could make in that area. From a functional perspective, of course, our platform was out of date and we weren't eligible for any of the latest updates or any of the latest functionality. So we were also falling behind from a functional perspective. Then, of course, there's a sort of ever-present threat of cybersecurity when you're trying to run an out-of-date platform and keep it patched and keep it up to date. So the net result of all this was twofold, really. Firstly, we were amassing unsustainable amounts of technical debt. Everything that we did on the website was either, a hack or a workaround or just, a quick fix to try and keep moving forwards and to try and overcome the limitations of the system without any real thought of the longer term implications. And this is an output from our discovery process where Luminary gave the feedback that what a mess we were making of it. So secondly, in trying to service that technical debt, we found that we were spending all our time and resources really just, trying to keep the thing running, trying to keep it up to date and trying to keep it alive. And it became a real distraction for us. We became less productive and less effective, and it detracted from our kind of core competencies and the things that we actually wanted to achieve on the website. Those were some of the key drivers really for us kind of kicking the project off. And given the level of technical debt that we had, and the fact that we now felt that we needed to revisit how our website could serve our wider audience, we decided to kick off a full discovery and redevelopment project with Luminary to find a better solution. So, what did that process look like? Well, I can't speak to the full process. I can't speak to the full discovery process here, but certainly in terms of the CMS selection, it's exciting to start with a blank piece of paper and to do some of that blue skies thinking and think about what is our ideal solution here if we're not encumbered by legacy platforms and all those sorts of requirements. But unfortunately, we don't have unlimited resources, so we needed a framework to kind of effectively reduce our consideration set down. So we started at the category level, and we looked at DXPs, and we looked at open source, and we looked at headless as an approach, and at a really high level, how well that would work for us as an organization and from an architectural perspective. We did our desktop research, and we spoke to other UNICEF offices. We had conversations with peers within the industry to find out what approaches they were taking, and to find out how they were structured and how it was working for them. And it was really during that kind of early kind of process that we found that the open source approach probably wasn't a great fit for us, just in terms of how we're organized and the resources that we have. but also in terms of how we want to deploy those resources going forwards. So we ruled out open source platforms, and we forged ahead with DXP and headless. So the next part of the process was really kind of taking the best-in-class platforms within those remaining categories, and starting to map their appropriateness at a functional fit at a more granular level. So in order to do that, we needed to define our critical success factors for the project, which you can see here. So that incorporated, obviously, a lot of those key drivers for kicking off the project in the first place, but also, our broader kind of strategic objectives as well. So we had a really, really clear framework for exactly, what we wanted in the platform to make it work for us. And at the end of that process, which I'm conscious I've only really spent a couple of minutes actually describing, but in actual fact, this process took us several months. We did a lot of due diligence. We put our risk lens on it. We did all our costing and all that sort of stuff. But at the end of this process, I made the recommendation that content was the best fit for UNICEF Australia. And thankfully, our steerco and ultimately our executive leadership team endorsed that decision. So why did we feel that content was such a good fit for UNICEF Australia? Unfortunately, there's no such thing as the perfect CMS. So as I mentioned in the process there, it's all about really just kind of aligning that fit against our specific requirements. And right from the outset, as you can probably imagine, we required a solution that was absolutely going to minimize technical debt. So things like updates, maintenance, security patches, that's definitely not where we wanted to be spending our time and resources. We needed a platform that was just going to work and that would handle all that on our behalf so that we could focus on our strategic imperatives. And I think closely related to that was also the fact that we could seamlessly integrate the platform into our wider environment. So, for example, taking advantage of some of those Salesforce integrations and eliminating all of those kind of manual processes. Then in terms of the authoring environment, we felt the simplicity of the user interface and the ease of updating content and the workflows that we had in the system made it so much easier for our users, and we could engage more people to take ownership of that content management piece, which is a really important objective at the start of the project. On top of that, the simplicity of updating and the collaboration tools allowed us to kind of respond to emergencies more quickly, which is a very important thing which we'll hear more about in just a minute. And finally, of course, in terms of cybersecurity, having that always up-to-date SaaS deployment with a headless architecture that doesn't retain any sensitive information, we felt like we were making a massive quantum leap forward in terms of our security. So that's a massively kind of whistle-stop overview of our project journey. As I said, throughout the project, our go-live date was very much not the end of the project. It was just the end of the beginning. And in fact, we've got a lot of plans to keep building, keep developing and optimizing the platform. And I genuinely think in content, we've got a great platform that will serve us for well into the future.
Thanks, Alan. So you've heard this acronym a few times. I could probably run a quiz to who knows what MAC stands for. So I won't go into detail about this, and I'm not going to show you any architecture diagrams or anything like that. I just wanted to point out all the due diligence Alan and the team went into, and all of those critical success factors, we had a bit of a challenge on our hands. They had big scalability challenges. They needed to be able to handle massive traffic spikes, security, and basically, how many nines of uptime, basically 100% uptime. So by implementing this stack, this by no means is this their actual set of tools. Alan's already mentioned Salesforce, and they've got donation platforms and everything, but here are some you'd probably recognize there. But by implementing this MAC architecture, so by separating things out into microservices, I think the biggest benefit that we saw was there's no single point of failure, and that's what we really wanted. So if their CI/CD tool were to go down or something like that, or there was a bug in the code, the latest version of the website is always there. It's always up and it's running quickly. If their donation platform goes down, at least the campaign pages are still up. If the form engine goes down, even if the entire website were to go down, which hasn't happened, but technically if something as big as Netlify were to fall apart, it's architected in a way that we can spin it up within a couple of minutes on a different cloud hosting provider. So that was the challenge, and thankfully it's going pretty well so far, I think. And that was all in service of the goal of keeping this thing up and snappy and fast and working for the UNICEF teams. So there's my segue into
Thank you.
the teams who are actually using the platform, and let's hear if it's working for them. Thanks.
Reveal it is. Thanks, Andy. Hi, I'm Nikola, Acquisition Manager at UNICEF Australia. Hopefully you have heard of UNICEF, but there's a very good chance you don't quite know what we do. So we work in 190 countries around the world, and we save more lives than any other humanitarian organisation. A core part of what we do as the United Nations Children's Emergency Fund is responding to emergencies. So we need to be able to unlock resources and funding really, really quickly when a war breaks out or a natural disaster strikes. Despite having United Nations in our name, we're actually 100% donor funded. So we need to be able to get our message out to market incredibly quickly when something happens. So in Australia, there are 60,000 registered charities, and the pool of donations doesn't typically fluctuate much year on year. It's a tight market. We know that we have a really loyal core group of supporters, but we know that they also donate to other charities. So it's really, really vital that we can get our messages out through our webpage, through EDM, incredibly quickly. For new supporters, which is where I come in as acquisition manager and my team, we have a really, really brief window of opportunity before our peers are also in market. And this is really when we see our best return on investment. We see our lowest cost per click before other people enter. So we need to make sure that we've got appeal pages up and we've got our advertising live ASAP. So I'll talk to you a little bit about where we've come from, and Alan's touched on this, and then to the more important part of where we are now, and this gives me like hot sweats looking at it. So we were working with an incredibly outdated CRM only 6 months ago. It was so clunky, it was slow, it took us forever to update. It had security risks. It was being held together by digital sticky tape. Anytime we needed something changed, we'd go to Alan and he'd sort of Frankenstein it together. It was constantly breaking, so I'm surprised he's still talking to me because of how often I would go to him for help and my team would go to him for help, so thank you. Yeah, it was just an absolute nightmare, and I think the biggest pain point for me was that it wasn't integrated with our CRM. So it would take a day, over the weekend, 36 hours for that data to pull through, which meant that in a really critical moment of an emergency when I needed to be able to see where our funding was coming from, I needed to be able to see the different sources, I needed to be able to see what was working. It was quite difficult to pull together all of that data and make really, really concrete decisions about where to scale up my media spend. So fast forward 6 months, and we now have our beautiful new website. So we have spent the past 6 months learning how to use it. It's been pretty good, pretty easy, I'd say. And we launched our first wide-scale emergency response last month with the Syria and Turkey earthquake. We found that this was way, way faster, way smoother, and it meant that it freed up my time to work on other things so that we were able to get our above-the-line campaign out into market more quickly. They had time to just focus on getting the rest of the campaign live and not focusing on getting our website updated. It also meant that we could email our supporters quickly. We were out before our competitors were. And it meant that things like our media team actually had somewhere that they could direct journalists to. So again, need for speed. This is not a beautiful slide, but the numbers on it are really, really beautiful. So we were able to get our campaign live within 4 hours. Really, the delays on this were internal processes. So I have no doubt that our next emergency will be within 3. And then I actually expect we can get that down to about 2 hours by the end of the year for a big campaign launch. And the one that's particularly beautiful to me in the acquisition world was that comparing to the Ukraine emergency last year, which was an incredibly successful campaign in terms of generating revenue and new supporters, in that critical first 48 hours, we were able to almost increase our new supporters by our new supporter donations by 98% compared to the Ukraine emergency. So really demonstrating how successful that speed to market was for us. And so a few things that we love about content, and you've heard about a lot of these things today from the different presenters, but very much having those content blocks that you can use across multiple pages is an enormous time saver for us. So we have multiple appeal pages, we customize content for different audiences, but during an emergency or a natural disaster, things move really, really quickly on the ground, and we need to be able to update our pages multiple times a day so that we're providing correct factual information. And we know that in the charity space, Transparency and being factual is just so important for the trust that we need. So this means that we've got one central place where we can make those updates and spread it out across all of our different pages, and it just frees up so much time for us to be doing much more important things. We're no longer losing people because we have a really slow, clunky website, so things load quickly. I'm not terrified that it's about to break. I'm not terrified that we're going to get a call from our CEO saying, hey, the website's down, because that definitely happened with our old site. The strength of the structure means that the branding is incredibly tight. Again, that's super important for transparency and trust with donors. And I think the biggest thing for me is that it's now completely integrated with our CRM. So we can see that donations are coming through within seconds. We can test appeal pages, and it means that I have the data and the knowledge there to be able to make really informed decisions about where I'm putting my marketing spend and scaling up budget quickly. So I'm no longer waiting, cobbling things together. It means I can make those decisions really quickly. So I would say, 6 months in, and it's definitely been very successful for our team. Thanks.
Thanks, Nikola. So it looks like we've stuck to the time. I don't know how we're going with the schedule, but I did want to make sure there was any time for some Q&A when we have the UNICEF Australia people here. Is that okay, organisers?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, great.
If there are any questions.
If there are any questions, otherwise I can ask a question.
Go for it, Andy.
All right, I'm gonna be the devil's advocate as well and say it was a big decision for you to go headless. It sounds like you weighed up all the options. What were some of the challenges that you faced moving from a traditional CMS to a headless CMS?
Yeah, interesting. I think, it was quite a paradigm shift in terms of, obviously how you use the system and sort of taking that safety net of the classic CRM away from your users. But it's a communication piece, really, as I found, post go live, because initially, I was really worried about that. I was really worried about our users kind of getting onto this new system and how they would fare with it. But, we did our training and we got people familiar with the system. And actually, when you look at it, it's super simple. It's just, sequential forms. It's like filling out a form. So it's been really easy. And pretty happy with how people have got on with it. I was expecting more pushback, if I'm honest, from our users.
Yeah, great. Awesome. Any other questions? Because I've got another one. All right. Alan, you mentioned that you've got more plans. Can you give us a sneak peek?
Yeah, I think so. The next big cab off the rank for us is the personalization piece. So it's something that we talked actually during our discovery phase and our development. We don't want to be one of those organizations that talks a lot about personalization. We want to be actually doing it. And I'm delighted to say that we actually have begun that process. So, what is it, 6 months since we've been live? We have actually begun the process of personalization. Results aren't quite in yet, but yeah, we have actually started doing that. So that's where we're at.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Here we go. We've got Oleg.
Personalization then, is it user-based or is it region-based? What type of personalization?
Okay. I'll repeat it for the cameras. So what kind of personalization are you implementing?
So we're starting pretty simple. We're starting with UTM parameters. And so what we have is we have email journeys going out to our users, and we use the UTM parameters within those links to personalize the landing pages for them. So starting pretty simple and building up. We've also got personalization blocks around our donation handles. We haven't used them yet, but what that means is that we can take the data from Salesforce and people's propensity and look at the amounts that they're likely to donate, and we can actually personalize that towards individual users. So, yep.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
Yes. So why uniform for personalization?
Speed. So historically, we've used Google Optimize. And, I don't know if there's any developers in here, but whenever you put the kind of Google Optimize tag on the site and it makes all those origin calls, it really adds to the weight of the page. So we've seen that really slow down. Uniform for me, it's a native kind of content integration, and it's served from the edge. So it was the most performant way for us to integrate that personalization, which was super important. So that was.
Oh yes. What tool have you used for the search?
Can we get a whoop?
Was that a planted question?
That's Algolia.
Yes. No. Sorry. The answer is Algolia.
Yeah.
if there are no more questions, feel free to come and harass me on your behalf. I'm saying please feel free to go and talk to these guys as well. Thank you very much for having us.